When mixing vocals, should you process your reverb? Reverb. Yes, I think you should actually. And that's what I love to do in every mix. There are two things I'm going to focus on. One is EQ and the other one is dynamics, being like de-essing and compression, that sort of thing. So let's dive right in. Just so you know what reverb I'm using, you can use anything, and there's a whole other video which would be about different types of reverb, which we're not going to go into for now. But today I'm using Waves CLA Epic. Really cool reverb plugin. It's a mixture of reverb and delay, and you can put the delays into reverbs and do loads of other stuff and lots of fancy things, which I've actually done a video on, so go and check that out if you haven't already. But let's just have a quick listen to that reverb just so you can hear what it's doing. One other thing, just so you know, I've also inserted just before the reverb a compressor. Now this is actually not doing any compression, it's just giving it a little bit more level and just adding a little bit more vibe, because I find that just helps with the reverb and just makes it sound a little bit cooler. But let's just have a little listen to that reverb so you can just hear what it actually sounds like on and off.
I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams. I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams.
So you can hear there's quite a lot going on there. There's quite a lot of tail, and that's going to get quite busy and definitely is going to be clouding the mix somewhat. So what I always do with my reverbs, first off, is EQ them. Now, there are a number of things that you can do with the EQing. To start off with, I find it's always best just to clean it up a little bit. So what lots of people do is a very common trick is to just filter out some of the high end and filter out some of the low. That helps to get rid of some of the low end rumble, which you're not really needing, especially if it's a vocal. All that stuff below 100 hertz or even higher can just be rumbly, muddy noise anyway. And everything with the very high end, sometimes that can be nice, but that can also introduce sibilance and other sounds that just start to get in a way with other things in the mix, especially if you have multiple vocals, like I'd like to do quite a lot. If you've got lots of different vocals going on and they've all got a lot of high end, then you're going to get a build up of all the sibilance and the general noise that's going on. So if we start by just doing that, you're going to hear a little bit of a difference already. So all I'm doing here is I'm rolling off the high end at around 8K and I'm rolling off the low end. Here's around 150. You can also go up to 200, whatever kind of works for you. Let's just see it before and after. And one thing that's important to mention at this point is I'm smashing a reverb all the way up. So this is quite a lot of reverb that we're hearing on here. I wouldn't usually be using this much reverb. I always like to smash the reverb up to begin with, because then you're kind of hearing it at its worst. You can adjust the level after that, but if you just clean it up the best you can at the beginning, then you're just going to be getting that much more of the good stuff. Okay, so let's just hear the difference between applying these filters or not. So we're going to start with the filters out to begin with.
I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams. I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams. I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams. I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams.
So you can hear that's just starting to get rid of some of the unwanted noise you've got going on. It's relatively subtle, but as I say, it's definitely a cumulative thing. If you've got lots of vocals going on, this is really, really going to help. Now, next is to take this one step further, and this is what I really like to do, and I think it makes a big difference. So now we're basically going to EQ the reverb like you are EQing a voice. In the same way, when you're EQing your vocals, you're going to cut some of the things which are getting in the way. You're going to cut out some of the mud. You're going to cut out some of the nasal sounds and whatnot. Now, although you've already done that in your reverb, I'm presuming at this point you've already kind of EQ'd and compressed your vocal so it's kind of sounding as good as it can sound. This is just taking it one step further. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to boost a few frequencies which I reckon are going to be, let's say, offensive or unnecessary, and then I'm going to pull those out and you're going to hear the difference. Here we go.
I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams, and there's nothing you can do about it. You see the other taking the things that you need, and they ain't gonna give you nothing. I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams, and nothing you can do about it. But there's no wonder when you...
Okay, so what I've basically done there is I've taken out some of that mid-range around 500 hertz, some of the upper mids or the kind of the nasal area, which is around between 1 and 2K, and then a little bit of the high end, which is about 5K or thereabouts. So now if we do a before and after, really have a listen in, especially to the high end, especially with some of the sibilants, you're going to hear those start to die away, but you're just going to hear that it's that little bit cleaner overall.
I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams. I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams. And there's nothing you can do about it. You see the other taking the things that you need, and they ain't gonna give you nothing. I see you, brother, falling apart at the sea.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take all of that off. I'm going to show you with the filters and then with the additional EQ, and then you can make your mind up to see if you think it's better or not. I think it's better.
I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams, and there's nothing you can do about it. You see the other taking the things that you need, and they ain't gonna give you nothing. I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams, and nothing you can do about it. But there's no wonder when you ain't gonna stand up and speak. What you gonna do about it?
I've actually got the reverb quite loud there, but now I've taken out some of the frequencies that are starting to cloud the mix. It's going to give you that much more clarity. But that's just reverb. We can take it a step further, and that's what we're going to do in part 2. If you are enjoying this video, please do me a favor and hit the old like and subscribe, and you'll be notified of upcoming videos. It really does help the channel, so I really do appreciate it when you do that, so thank you. Also, if you sign up to the main list below, I'll send you some free stuff. I'll send you an EQ cheat sheet and some one-shots that you can use in your mixes. So all of that is for free, and it's just as a thank you for signing up. So it's a few things to help you out. Okay. Cheers. All right, next up is dynamics. Specifically, we're going to look at de-essing and some sidechain compression. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm already adding this compressor to the reverb. This is sitting just before the reverb. Now, it's actually not doing any compression at all. It's just adding a little bit of vibes. It's just giving a little bit more level and just a little bit more flavor to the sound. You don't have to use a compressor here. You could use a bit of saturation. You could use a preamp emulation, but anything that just gives you a little bit more character. So the first thing I'll do is add a de-esser. Now, one thing which really stands out in the trails of reverb will be the sibilants, the S's. Now, as I've already said, I'm already taking a bunch of those out with the EQ. So I'm taking a bunch of things which are getting in the way. So the de-esser doesn't have to do too much work. It just needs to attack the places which are really problematic. So what I've done is I've inserted a de-esser straight after the EQ, and it's generally focusing on everything above around 5K, which is where all of the sibilants is going to be, all your S's, all the T's. You'll notice here I'm actually going fairly aggressive, more aggressive than I would be going on a de-esser, which is just slapped right on the channel, because I'm doing a different job here. I'm not trying to make it natural, if you like. For the reverb, you can go much more heavy-handed. So it's like I'm almost taking the sibilants out completely. Yes, I'll be leaving a little bit in, but I'm going that much more aggressive. So let's just have a quick listen and you'll see a difference. I'll do it before and after. I'm using the Waves de-esser here because I just really like it, and it's a straight up easy to use and effective de-esser, but you can use any de-esser you like.
I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams. I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams.
Now, this is going to be that much more subtle now because I've done the EQ moves before. But the main thing to understand is that it is just taking care of any kind of build-up which is going to occur. Like I said earlier, especially if you have multiple vocals going on. Now, the last thing I want to do, and this is a really effective one, is add in a sidechain compressor. Now, you've probably seen this in action before. I've actually done a whole video about where to use a sidechain, so go and check that out if you haven't already. I'll kind of put it up there somewhere. So what this is essentially doing is anytime the vocal is playing, in, it will duck the reverb just a little bit until the vocal stops. Once the vocal stops, it allows the reverb to flourish. What this does is it creates more clarity in your mix. Having reverb all over the place can start to get a little bit messy, can start to get a little bit muddy, and you don't always want to hear the reverb when the vocal is going. You're really hearing it. You're listening to the tails. That's where the good stuff happens. So what I've done here is I've inserted the compressor as a last point just after the reverb. Now you can use any compressor to do this. I'm using the Waves C1, but you just need one which has a sidechain input on it. And then I'm taking that sidechain input from the vocal. So over here, this is my main vocal channel. This is a vocal group. These are the sends that I have going on. Now you can set up a specific sidechain if you like, and you can just call it sidechain. So just have it sent to a bus. As it happens, I already have multiple buses set up which are going to other parallel processes. In this case, this one happens to be an exciter and it's going full whack. So what I'm doing is I'm just using that same input as my sidechain input. That's why it says exciter there. So now what you're going to notice is on this compressor, it's going to start to attenuate the signal as that vocal is going. And then when the vocal is not going, it's going to be relatively inactive. Now you can play with the other settings on here, like how much compression you want it to be doing and at what ratio. I've just gone for a fairly nominal amount. So about roughly 2:1. You can go a little bit more aggressive, maybe 3:1 if you like, but just adjust the threshold to see exactly how much you feel like it needs. So I'll show you a quick before and after, and then you should be able to hear the difference.
I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams, and there's nothing you can do about it. You see the other taking the things that you need, and they ain't gonna give you nothing.
So instantly you'll hear how much cleaner that is and how you can get a focus on a vocal, but you're still hearing the reverb tails at the most important parts, which are kind of in between the vocals. So you're still hearing that the vocal is in a space. Now, if I just adjust the threshold, you're going to see how much of a difference that can make. And this is where you find your sweet spot, which although you can adjust it in solo like I have it now, the best thing really is to do that in context of the mix, because then you're going to really be able to judge exactly where you need it to sit. Let's hear the difference.
I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams, and there's nothing you can do about it. You see the other taking the things that you need, and they ain't gonna give you nothing.
So you can notice there, when it was doing a great deal and really shutting off that reverb, when the vocal stops, the reverb comes right back in and it sounds quite unnatural. So the main thing you want to do is just adjust that so you can't really hear the compressor working too hard. It's more that it's just subtly dipping the reverb and just making it that little bit cleaner and therefore sitting the mix a little bit better. Okay, so now let's just have a look at all of that processing before and after, so you can hear the difference and just really notice how it cleans things up. It gives that vocal that much more clarity, which will allow it to sit in a mix better, but you're still hearing a reverb at the right points. Here we go.
I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams, and there's nothing you can do about it. You see the other taking the things that you need, and they ain't gonna give you nothing.
And there you go. So I hope that's been pretty clear that it is totally worth processing your reverbs. Even if you just do a little bit of EQing, that makes a difference. It's all about clearing it up to give it a better place to sit in a mix. And then taking it a step further with the de-essing and sidechain compression, that is when things start to get really interesting. So give it a go, have a play around, be interested to see what you think and what else you do to your reverbs on vocals to make them sit a little bit better in the mix. As always, if you've got any questions, just leave them in the comments below and I'll try my best to answer where I can. But otherwise, thanks very much for watching. See you next time.